Alrighty, folks. It is time at long last for Grand Prix Elseworlds, the fourth Revolution Eternal Grand Prix and the final one of 2025. I have a pretty fun deck, I think, here for this month. Not the one people have seen me really grinding, but the deck did get hit with a pre-GP ban and nerf. So I don't think Hoarder Combo was really on the menu, and I don't think anyone will be surprised to see me on something other than Hoarder Combo. But where Hoarder was the thing I was most excited to play this month, this is the thing I think is likely to fare the best, at least in my hands. So it combines two particular strategies. One I ran for last December's Eternal Tournament, and one I ran earlier this year, both times to not a whole lot of success, I will admit, but I think there are some ideas in those decks with some staying power and some new pieces from this year that each of those decks would have really appreciated. So, before we dive into the deck in more detail, as always, links in the description below for all things Revolution Custom Standard. There is the Custom Magic Discord server where you can join in the conversation, play the format for yourself, and follow along with people's custom Magic projects as they work on them. The Revolution Compendium for all of your potential options to include in deck sorted by card role. And the two custom magic search engines, those being the built-in Lackybot engine and Escape from Limbo. There's also, I don't often mention it, but in the link of the description for any GP video, there should also be a link to the tournament bracket. So if you are just in the moment wondering what the standings are, you can check that at any time. It'll be in the description below as well. So let's talk white-black Revolt of the Palace. I played this deck, I believe it was in the July GP this year, as a very low creature count deck, really leaning on Revolt's ability to put non-creature permanents into play that have meaningful enter triggers and start grinding out a ton of value over the long term. So that deck was very control-y, built to try and run the opponent out of resources over time, and I kind of just got ran down by a lot of opponents over the course of the GP. Unsurprisingly, I think. And my overall sentiment was that I think Revolt of the Palace is really good, but that as time has gone on, I feel Revolt of the Palace's best shot for seeing reliable, viable play is going to be when it is consistently hitting creatures. On the flip side, last year in December, I played white-black Yaeji, which is more to say I played Diabolical Minion Yaeji. So this is the big absence from this deck, I think, out of everything that I'm playing this month. Diabolical Minion, pretty iconic card in the format's history. Whenever you cast a black spell or an artifact spell, each opponent loses one, you gain one. Whenever you cast a non-black, non-artifact spell, you lose one life. So as long as you're on a mono black deck, this card will just murder your opponent, and heal you up as you take game actions. And if you are taking the risk of splashing a second color, you're going to start suffering for it. Last year, I played a mostly mono black deck, splashing white for, I believe, just Yaeji. Or at the very least, Yaeji was the only card I was playing that would not gain me life and deal damage to the opponent off of Diabolical Minion. And I think there were some things that I really liked about the deck, but ultimately, Minion does have its flaws. And one of the things that I have felt more and more over time is that I think Minion is gradually becoming a trap in Eternal. I think there are ways to make Minion hum. I think you really want to be in mono black, no extra color. And I think you want to be as aggressive as possible. Whereas people are starting to push towards more value-oriented plans, more mid-rangey plans. And I think those are plans where Minion does not shine. And in the aggressive shells, Minion is something you really only love doing on turn one, where you can maximize triggers. And in those contexts, I'm not even sure then that it's going to really, truly thrive. Now, yes, Minion does have a history of dominating in Eternal fields, not even necessarily Eternal specifically, but the one Pauper tournament we've ever had was overrun with Minion decks to the point where it got banned from Pauper. So it's kind of weird for me to be taking this call that I think this card's a trap, but I'm taking this position with the basis that I fell for this trap last year. And I'm not falling for it this time, but I do think the white-black mid-range plan does have some real gas, and I think Yaeji is still a really core part of that plan. So for folks who don't remember Yaeji, this is a 3/3 for 3 with first strike on your turn. Whenever you amp it up, which is to say attack with 3 or more creatures or cast your second spell in a turn, you get to exile up to 1 permanent card from your graveyard with mana value 3 or less and make a token that's a copy of it. So good with fetch lands like New Divide and the brand new Primal Fissure, because you can crack those over and over. Good with the brand new Desolate Path, because you can cycle that and then get it back with Yaeji later on, or in the late game you can just cycle it and then get it back with Yaeji for more land drops. And most importantly for Yaeji, you can get back any meaningful permanent mana value 3 or less. So you get a lot of resiliency and a lot of grind potential out of your Yaejis. And one of the biggest problems I had with Yaeji last year was that my deck did not attack super well. A lot of small creatures with no meaningful amount of evasion, no meaningful amount of pressure to back them up to justify swinging in with at least 3 creatures. And so Yaeji's reliable manaless mode was not really coming online, and I was dependent on casting 2 spells every turn. This direction of this build is trying to get more value out of the attacking clause. So we're on 24 creatures here, which is a lot more than my last Revolt of the Palace deck, and we're taking advantage of one particular Exalted Twiltree card that I think is going to be the missing piece of the puzzle here. Thorn and Trial is a 1 and a white Operation Battle. When it enters, you return target creature or planeswalker card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Important things to note here. Number 1, it does not get rid of the card permanently, unlike Yaeji. So there is a bit of tension here in that we want to Thorn and Trial stuff back that we would not want to exile with Yaeji, and vice versa. With Yaeji, we do not want to have Yaeji get anything back if getting it back with Thorn and Trial could be better for our long-term plans. In a lot of cases, we're trying to build our deck in such a way that that won't have to be a choice we make a whole lot of the time, but it's a choice that could come up, and so it's something we will have to keep in mind. The other really important part of Thorn and Trial is, unlike most of our 2-mana Unearth effects that we have in the format, and we have a lot in Eternal and a good amount in rotation as well, this gets back Planeswalkers. And there's one particular Planeswalker that's amazing to get back with Yaeji in Glauna Decadent Demon. 3 mana, 3 loyalty. Whenever you indulge, you put a loyalty counter on her, and she has indulgence to note that you indulge if you've gained 3 or more life or drawn 2 or more cards in a turn. And she has a -1 to make a 2/1 with flying that can't block, and a -2 to destroy a creature or planeswalker and have its controller lose 2 life. Glauna is probably the best planeswalker in Eternal, and is one of the better planeswalkers in the format's history, that being Revolution Standard as a whole. So for us to have access to Glauna here and be able to repeatedly use Glauna as removal to just pick off creatures and planeswalkers, clear the way for our attackers, is going to be really strong. And the -1 also just makes us more safe attackers to keep triggering the Amp It Up attack clause on Yaeji. And because Glauna now has a lot of consistency between the 3 copies of Yaeji and 3 copies of Thorn in Trial, there is really no harm in having the opponent pick one of them off. And there's really no harm in us just taking Glauna down to a point where we lose her on board anyways. If we remove something, somehow get an indulgence trigger, and then remove something again and she dies, that's still 3 mana to kill 2 things, deal 4 to the opponent. That's a really good deal. So yeah, that is Thorn and Trial able to get back 2 really key cards that we otherwise would maybe be able to get back once or twice with Yaeji, but the heightened reliability of getting those things back is really important. And this being a permanent means it's a hit for Revolt at the Palace, meaning a Thorn and Trial off the top means Revolt isn't just representing the 6 cards it looks at, but potentially also anything in our graveyard. And we've got a lot of creatures as well. So let's start talking about the rest of those creatures. We've got 7 1-drops across a playset of Ignited Souls. Just nice, small, evasive 1-drop I was trying out Rooftop Slink for a little bit, but I think flipping Slink for 4 mana is just never really going to happen. We're not really on any artifact tools to help pay its Cyber Soul cost, but Ignited Soul itself is just simple, clean, can help fix our hand, and the nice part of that discard to draw clause is we can kind of set up our graveyard to get some tempo off of Thorn and Trial, or, just start setting up Yaeji instead. They're also relatively unimportant bodies in the long term, so card we'll get to later that can sacrifice these. It's not worst thing in the world to just sacrifice them. And the evasion is really nice, both to make, again, that attack more safe with Yaeji, but also just kind of chip away at our Thorn and Trial. We also have 3 copies of Melon Defense Attorney. I'm not 100% on this, but I think it could do a lot of good. With GPs being open decklist, we're almost always going to be able to name a relevant color. Potentially all of our opponents' relevant colors with Melon. And from there, it's a Mother of Runes in a sort of way. Give hexproof from a color, can't be blocked by creatures of that color. So it's a purely offensive Mother of Runes in that sense. You can't use it on defense super well in terms of, blocking something and then fading all of the damage. You can't just completely cause it to ignore all damage from mass damage spells. But for the most part, Melon's relevance here is that it's going to help us get through opposing blockers more reliably, help us kind of soak up opposing removal, because opponents are just going to want to burn removal on Melon. And it's not the worst card to draw multiples of, because you just get to pledge on your secondary and tertiary copies. So we can either take the Silliman pledge to tap down opposing blockers, or tap down our own stuff, put counters on them. We can take the Tyrell pledge just to surveil 2, get some more cards in our graveyard, potentially set up a Thorn and Trial or a Yaeji trigger. Or we can take the Penwrath pledge and just punch harder. +2/+2 is pretty reasonable. And again, Yaeji getting back lands that we've discarded or fetches we've cracked means that it's not impossible that we just find ourselves with mana to spare spending on pledges as well. Jumping up to 2 drops, we've got 2 playsets and a 3 of. We've got a playset of Exorcist of Errors, 2 mana, 2/3. When it enters, you already know what this does. It hand attacks the opponent, forces them to split their hand into a face up and face down pile. You get a non-land card from one of those piles and gets it exiled until Exorcist leaves play. This card is probably the best creature in Standard, and it is going to keep putting in work. Big shocker that it is in an Eternal deck. The other playset's a little less powerful, but it's a pet card of mine, and I'll admit, I don't think it's going to be the best card in the deck by any measure, but I'm doing recursive mana value 3 or less stuff in white and black. I'm going to play Void Mist Prodigy. 2 mana, 1/1. When it enters, you may sacrifice a creature to have target opponent lose 3 life, and you gain 3 life, and it's got Death Touch. Typically, you sacrifice it to itself for the sake of being able to loop it with things like Yaeji and now Thorn and Trial. The nice thing about some of our other creatures not being the most impressive bodies in the world, even if they're solid attackers, is that we don't mind sacrificing an Ignited Soul to this if we just want the Death Toucher in play over the Menace Attacker. If we're on the back foot and the Death Toucher is better, absolutely, I'll pop an Ignited Soul to keep Void Mist in play. And then when the opponent swings into Void Mist Prodigy and we get to trade it, we still get to tee up the Yaeji or the Thorn and Trial triggers later on. And it also pads our life total, which is really nice. Gaining 3 life triggers Glauna. Discarding to draw with Ignited Soul triggers Glauna for Indulgence. So, it's just a decent bit of value. The 3 of 2 drop, and I really do wonder if I should be on a playset of these and 3 copies of Void Mist Prodigy, is Pressuring Ghoul. Another pickup from this year alongside Exorcist of Errors. I think this card is underplayed in rotation, but I think the decks that could use it best just don't quite have all the pieces. So I understand why we haven't seen a ton of Pressuring Ghoul, but I think this card is going to start seeing more and more play next year, especially as people start tinkering around with black mid-range a little bit more. I think, Exorcist is obviously the 2-drop of choice, and it's going to be the 2-drop of choice for the entirety of Pressuring Ghoul's lifespan now. But I think this card is really good, and if your plan is to kill the opponent this card is going to put them in a real bind. It gets out of range of Twilight Ambush really quickly. It, shreds the opponent's hand over time. It's an evasive attacker with haste, so it's really easy to play and trigger the Amp It Up clause on Yaeji with it the turn that you play it. If you curve out Yaeji and you just have one other creature in play when you play Yaeji, the following turn, Pressure and Cool enables the Yaeji Amp It Up, and that's only 2 of your 4 mana on turn 4 to potentially get the double spell Amp It Up as well. Pressure and Cool also really good with Yaeji by just having Yaeji get back lands, Pressure and Cool landfall triggers from that, so you can get landfall triggers in combat with Yaeji. So I think Pressure and Ghoul is really good. I came really close to playing a 4th copy and cutting down to 3 Voidmist Prodigies, but I think Prodigy thrives when you have as many copies as possible, and I definitely wasn't cutting an Exorcist. Beyond that, 3 drops. Of course, we've got the 3 copies of Yaeji. Our other 3 drop at the top of our creature curve is Unburnt Maiden. 3 mana 2/2 with First Strike and Vigilance. When it enters or attacks, you may have it Dare X, which is to have it become a legendary creature that is a rebel in addition to its other types, with base power and toughness X. X in this case is the number of creatures you control. If you don't have it Dare, you instead create a 1/1 white warrior creature token. Maiden is here primarily as just another annoying attacker. It's going to be hard for the opponent to block reasonably. It gets to attack very safely. And because our deck is kind of built to push wide and swing wide, Maiden is going to be able to build up a pretty reasonable stat line to the point where it is going to threaten lethal very quickly if left unchecked. Very clean hit off of Thorn and Trial on turn 2. Very clean hit off of Revolt at the Palace. Card, I think, is just kind of going to be the other solid 3-drop in this context, and it really helps us alongside Yaeji in making sure our 3-drops are really frustrating to block, because we've got 2 different 3-drops that swing in with First Strike. Last but not least for our spells is 3 copies of Half-Heart's Claim, another card that I am a big ol' softy for alongside Voidmist Prodigy. This is a lot of reach over the top. When it enters, the opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. With Half-Heart's Claim and Voidmist Prodigy, that is 7 different instances of deal 3 to the opponent, gain 3 life. That, on its own, is lethal, but Half-Heart's Claim gets to push even more lethal, because whenever we attack, we put a strategy counter on one of its modes, and sacrifice it after all modes are marked. First mode is return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. What do you know, that kind of wants to be a thing we're already trying to do reliably. The other mode lets us sacrifice a creature to destroy target non-land permanent with mana value 3 or less. Now, you probably noticed that our deck is a little light on removal because we're not really looking to run a bunch of removal spells in this mid-range deck, and that seems kind of anathema at first. We've got 4 copies of Glauna, and we've got Recursion to keep Glauna going, but we have nothing to check non-creature, non-planeswalker permanents, but Half-Heart's Claim does cover us on that base. It's very easy for us in an awkward board state where we don't have safe attacks, but we still want to get the Half-Heart's Claim trigger to just swing in with something we don't care about losing, and have it die to the Half-Heart's Claim trigger rather than to combat damage. One thing to note with Half-Heart's Claim is that putting a strategy counter is not optional, so we only get 2 attacks with this in play. If we can't line up the removal mode, we can't line up the removal mode, but the recursion mode and the life loss, life gain mode are the 2 most important things on Half-Heart's Claim. So I'm going to prioritize getting the damage out of this as cleanly as I can, and getting the value out of the first of the 2 modes as often as I can. And if I don't get to remove something with the third mode, with the final mode, I'll live with that. Because ultimately it still gets the card into the graveyard to get back with Yaeji to keep the chain going. And one last thing to mention before we get to lands is that because we're on such a creature-dense Revolt of the Palace deck, we do actually get reliable use out of that 3rd chapter ability. So not only can we put a bunch of things from our deck into play, because every non-land card in our deck is a hit for Revolt of the Palace, we also just get good value out of the Double Strike. We've got combat damage trigger on Ignited Soul. Pressure and Ghoul with Double Strike is very lethal. Melan can help a relevant double striking creature get through more cleanly. Exorcist of Errors does just, hit a lot harder as a 4/3 instead of a 2/3. And then Unburnt Maiden and Yaeji are going to hit like trucks as well. The only thing that really doesn't leverage that is Void Mist Prodigy, and I think we can live with that. Moving on to lands, we've got a kind of funky mana base here. I wanted to play a couple different one-of lands, some utility here. So we're kind of operating on some funkiness, but I think we can make it work. We've got 3 copies each of Primal Fissure and New Divide. Sorry, I was thinking about how we would want to start this, but I think we'll start with the basic fetches. I'm on an even split between New Divide and Primal Fissure because I think there's no one that is better than the other in this deck. I think Fissure is just unabashedly better in the early game, but New Divide being able to be untapped reliably off of Yaeji is really valuable because, we just pay 2 life to have the New Divide come in untapped, whereas Primal Fissure, by the time we get to Yaeji, is just always going to be tapped. That's 6 basic fetches with 7 basic lands, 3 copies of Plains, 4 copies of Swamp. From there, we have a bunch of different dual lands. We got 3 copies of Stark Expanse and Downtown Theater, so 3 shock lands, 3 fast lands. 2 copies of Desolate Path, so little faster land with cycling 2. And then 1 each Dormant Temple and Gates to the Underworld. Dormant Temple as just sort of a nice later on cycle it, and then we can get back with Yaeji and cycle it again. Gates to the Underworld. I really didn't want to go 0 copies of this, but it is the iffiest land in my mana base. I just like Gates a lot, and I think we've got enough cards that are looking to stick in play that getting this down to getting up to 5 total devotion in play is not beyond the realm of reason for Gates to the Underworld. So that is the main deck. Now let's talk about sideboard. We've got 5 different 3-ofs in the sideboard. Let's talk about removal. 3 copies each. Let Them Eat Cake and Event Horizon. These are just kind of the best in class removal spells in either of our colors. We could play some black removal. Twilight Ambush and Sovereign's Execution come to mind, but I think Let Them Eat Cake is just the most efficient option that we could reach for. We don't really have a lot of reasons to want instants over sorceries anyhow. Really nothing that we're holding mana up for on the opponent's turn, so we might as well get away with playing the sorcery over the instant. And I did weigh between Let Them Eat Cake and specifically... I'm just going to pull it up here. Conspicuous Homicide. I did weigh between Homicide and Let Them Eat Cake. Ultimately, the things that swayed me towards Cake are that it can hit Planeswalkers and that the food is a lot less meaningful for the opponent than the clue. Though Homicide, having no mana value cap, is really good. Ultimately, Let Them Eat Cake is really good as well, and I think the fact that we're not on Diabolical Minion means there's no reason for us to push ourselves towards the mono black option over the mono white solely for the minion, and at that point this is just a more flexible tool that doesn't give our opponents as much value. And then Event Horizon, just reliably the best thing to be doing in terms of removal spells. People are going to be putting permanents into play. This is going to pick off the most relevant permanent almost every time. It's not amazing against Reanimator, but I think, you just have other things you want to try and do against Reanimator anyways. Otherwise, just beat the shit out of your opponent and then use Event Horizon to clear problematic things. Our other non-creature is Absentia. I think this is probably one of our best hand attack spells now. I could play Supply Raid, I could play Transgress Identity, but I think Absentia hitting graveyards is going to be really nice. I don't really want to reach for 2 mana artifacts that hate on graveyards or combos. No Golden Bloom of the Silenced or anything. I think I just want my cards to function reliably and not just kind of sit there in play, hope they don't get removed. So most of our creatures do something besides sit there and look pretty. So I'm not really reaching for Golden Bloom. I'm not really reaching for any other sort of graveyard hate. And of course, we have graveyard tools as well. So Crucible of the Burning Sun is not going to be amazing for us either. Absentia just gives us reliable hand attack to clear the most important pieces from the opponent's hand, especially early on in the game. And then the graveyard hate clause makes it so it's not just dead later on. And if it ever does become dead, Ignited Soul helps us pitch dead sideboard cards later on anyways. Then we have two different creatures. Looming Psyhawk is going to be another key piece for, anti-combo and stuff. One of the key combos of this month has been Hoarder combo. Not to brag or anything, but Looming Psyhawk, I think, is sneakily the best sideboard tool against Hoarder combo because so many of those combo lines are really reliant on token generation to get Hoarder rolling, to get the kills rolling reliably, and Looming Psyhawk just shuts those kills off every time. Can't make treasure tokens when you can't make any tokens at all. And Justiciar Overseer is another sneaky include specifically as an anti-aggro tool because this card just single-handedly swings combat. 3 mana, 3/1, flash flyer. When it enters, the next 2 damage that a source of your choice would deal to you and or permanent you control this turn is dealt to any target instead. So we do have to declare target, I believe, right off the bat. I need to double check rulings on Justiciar Overseer to make sure I understand how this works properly before we get into matches. But essentially, this is going to allow us to fog some damage from a creature in combat, point that damage at another creature the opponent has. Worst case scenario, this is a 3 mana 3/1 that makes Ambush Viper look pathetic. And then it's just a 3/1 flyer, so not the most embarrassing thing in the world to hit off of Revolt of the Palace or off of a recursion effect like Thorn and Trial, Half Art's Claim, Yaeji. And the benefit of Justiciar Overseer at sorcery speed off of one of those effects is that we can just pick something on the opponent's board that could be a source of damage and then go to combat, and the opponent's in a really awkward spot before we even make attacks. So Overseer going to be pretty good. I almost put it in the main over Unburnt Maiden, but I do think Maiden is the better hit off of all of our different 3 of mana value 3 or less matters cards. So Maiden was the thing I ultimately went for in the main. But Overseer is, I think, still pretty stellar. So we'll probably get some use out of it over this GP. Can't promise it, but I'm expecting to be boarding in it at least once. And that is Yaeji Palace. I'm really excited to jam this deck. I love so many of the cards in this deck. I love Yaeji. I love Void Mist Prodigy. I love Half Art's Claim, Revolt at the Palace. I love Pressuring Ghoul, Thorn and Trial, Glauna, Unburnt Maiden, Justiciar Overseer. So there's some real heat in this deck in terms of just cards that are near and dear to my heart, and then some really key glue to make sure that this deck actually functions. So we'll see how it fares in practice. I was very confident in how powerful my deck was this time last year, and then I went 1 win, 2 losses. So even if this deck does end up to be as powerful as I'm expecting, there's no guarantee that there aren't better things going on in the field than what I'm on right now. So we'll see how the field shapes up. I'm about to go live in about an hour or so as of this recording to cover the deck list stream in more detail. So I look forward to doing all of that, and I look forward to seeing you all next time in round 1. Until then, as always, go ahead and check out the links in the description below if you want to check out the format for yourself. And I'll see you all in the Revolution chat. Bye-bye.